It was a crash that was caught on camera, and this is the first crash of the Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner. Now, this is a long-endurance aircraft. Watch those images as it lifts off. That's been caught on the CCTV camera. There, you watch the liftoff, barely flies for about 38 seconds, lifts off, attains an altitude of 625 feet, and then it starts yawing to a side, and then it starts sinking gradually. All efforts are being made, perhaps by the pilots, to revive the aircraft, to gain altitude, because that's the only thing. But then, laden with fuel, 242 passengers and crew on board, it sinks and crashes to the ground in a huge orange ball of fire and smoke. It crashed onto the hostel and mess building of a medical college. This is extremely, extremely unfortunate. This air crash of the Boeing 787. The first flight, incidentally, of a Boeing 787 Dreamliner was in 2009. It's been flying across the world with multiple airlines, considered amongst the safest. However, there have been whistleblowers in the United States of America who've raised questions about this aircraft even in the past. The FAA, or the Federal Aviation Authority in the United States of America, had initially begun an investigation a couple of years earlier when a whistleblower raised some issues about the safety of the aircraft. But then it's been flying, and it's been flying almost by some of the best airlines across the world, including American Airlines, Japan Airlines, Air India. They fly the 787-8 Dreamliner. 242 passengers were on board this aircraft when it crashed. Very, very unfortunate. Was it a loss of thrust? Why was the landing gear still down? There are some pilots who've said the landing gear, moments after takeoff, the landing gear goes up immediately, but in this case, it didn't. Was that an issue? Is it true that the plane is actually yawing to the left a bit? Pilot issued a mayday call. Mayday, mayday is what he said. And the moment he said that, the ATC went back to him. However, if you notice, the ATC then said there was no response from the pilot, and seconds later, this huge ball of fire. India Today's Sandeep Punithan now joins me with the latest on this, and he explains how this aircraft suddenly went up in flames. And Sandeep, I mean, just look at these images. It just defies imagination that an aircraft is just lifting off, can lift off even on one engine should there be an emergency, but in this case, it just starts sinking and then crashes to the ground. What happened?
Air India Flight 171 was headed from Ahmedabad to London Gatwick Airport on the 12th of June when it crashed shortly after takeoff. It's one of India's worst aviation incidents. What do we know about this tragedy so far? Well, the aircraft was taking off from Sardar Patel Airport in Ahmedabad. This airport has a runway with a length of 3.5 meters. The Boeing 787 took off. It hit an altitude of about 190 meters, and suddenly there was a mayday call from the cockpit with the pilots desperately radioed an SOS, and then the plane descended and crashed in a fireball here, just 2 kilometers away from the runway. There were 242 passengers and crew on board. Now, there's a video that's emerged of this tragic accident just a few minutes after the aircraft took off, and that video has something very unusual. The aircraft has its undercarriage lowered and its flaps retracted. Now this is very interesting because as a pilot who studied this footage explained to us, an aircraft that was taking off and was at 190 meters would normally have these flaps lowered because an aircraft needs to generate that kind of lift with the flaps lowered, and this is a very critical position. But in the video that we've seen, the flaps are level, they're plain, right? The 787 is an interesting design. The wings are 60 meters long. It has a wingspan of 60 meters. The length of the aircraft is just 57 meters, which means its wingspan is longer than the length of the aircraft itself. But this one incident of the flaps being level at a time when the aircraft literally has to generate the maximum lift, lower the flaps, undercarriage is retracted, of course, and as it's taking off, that points to something that went wrong inside the cockpit. The pilots must have been going through an emergency. They were trying to lower the undercarriage, or something happened. We don't know for sure yet. But that video is very crucial, and I'm sure in the next couple of days, as investigators try and gather the black box and collect evidence, this is going to be very crucial to understand what happened to the tragic Air India flight 171 that crashed in Ahmedabad.
Air crashes, aircraft accidents, they're studied world over because there are lessons to be drawn. The cockpit voice recorder, the flight data recorder, it's in an orange-colored box that's known as the black box at the tail of the aircraft where it's relatively safe. We're told the moment that's retrieved, that will be sent to Boeing for an analysis, and then there would be better appreciation. Of course, the last conversation between the pilot and the air traffic controller was Mayday, Mayday. But why was this distress call given out? That clarity we are still awaiting. But in this gloom and doom, there was a miracle. One man of the 242 on board walked out of the aircraft on his feet. Watch that image. The police have now confirmed they found the lone survivor after this plane crash in Ahmedabad. The survivor has minor injuries, but as you can see, the man identified as Vishwas Kumar Ramesh. He was seated on seat number 11A. He was returning to the UK with his brother, who incidentally is still unaccounted for. India Today has spoken to this miracle survivor. He recalled that horror. The man said there was a loud noise within 30 seconds of the takeoff. And after that, everything happened very, very quickly. He told India Today when he stood up, he was surrounded by bodies and debris all around. And then he just got up and started running away from that fire, from that fear. And Vishwas was later put in an ambulance. He was taken to hospital. He was in ICU. But listen in to what he had to say. I quickly want to cut across to India Today's Vijay Doshi joining me from the crash site, that medical college. Vijay, is there a little more clarity on survivors? Have there been other survivors? Are there people still unaccounted for? And what about the situation on ground? We believe a couple of buildings, they were burnt and they were damaged. Were there people inside these buildings?
यहाँ पे लोग खाना खा रहे थे, कुछ में कुछ ऐसे इंडियन डॉक्टर्स थे, कुछ परिवार के साथ थे जिनके ऊपर ये कहर बन के टूटा। यहाँ पे जो हालत है, देखिए थाली में खाना अभी भी पड़ा हुआ है, खाना खा रहे लोगों के ऊपर प्लेन गिरा, उसके बाद की क्या स्थिति हुई होगी कल्पना करना जो है वो बेहद ही मुश्किल है। यहाँ पे कांच जो है वो टूटे हुए हैं, शीशे टूटे हुए हैं, दीवार जो है यहाँ पे देखिए प्लेन का ये जो पार्ट है वो किस तरह मैस में आके गिरा और यहाँ की दीवार टूट गई है। पूरी तरह से ये मलबे में परिवर्तित हो गया है। प्लेन का मलबा था और इसने हॉस्टल के मैस को मलबे में परिवर्तित कर दिया है। किस तरह की स्थिति यहाँ पे है, जो मैस की स्थिति थी यहाँ पे ये डॉक्टर्स खाना खा रहे थे। ये ऐसे डॉक्टर हैं कि जो इंटर्न डॉक्टर्स हैं अभी यहाँ पढ़ाई कर रहे हैं और उसके बाद वो जो हैं आगे बढ़ने वाले हैं। उनसे पहले उनकी जो है इनमें से कहा जा रहा है कि कुछ डॉक्टर्स की जान भी चली गई है। हालांकि आधिकारिक आंकड़ा नहीं दिया गया कि कितने डॉक्टर्स यहाँ पे थे और कितने जो हैं जिनकी मृत्यु हो चुकी है, पर 30 से ज़्यादा डॉक्टर्स ऐसे थे जिनको यहाँ से जो है तत्काल सारवार के लिए ले जाया गया, इलाज के लिए ले जाया गया और उनके साथ उनके परिवार के भी कुछ लोग थे। ये स्थिति दिखाती है कि क्या हुआ होगा उस हादसे के वक्त, किस तरह की स्थिति रही होगी, लोग कैसे भागे होंगे और जो जिनके हाथ में खाना था वो खाने के टेबल पे ही जो है उन्होंने अपनी आखिरी सांस ली होगी। भयावह दृश्य होंगे वो और वहाँ पे हम अभी आज पहुँचे हैं। कितने लोग इनमें से जिंदा है, जब वो बाहर आएंगे तब वो इस बयां करेंगे कि क्या हादसा हुआ था। पर अभी किसी देख के ये अंदाज़ा लगाना कि उस वक्त क्या हुआ होगा ज़रा भी मुश्किल नहीं है। समझ सकते हैं कि आप खाना खा रहे हैं और ऊपर से कोई बम का गोला गिरे तो क्या हालत होगी, वैसी हालत यहाँ पे लोगों की हुई होगी। अहमदाबाद से कैमरामैन जिमिनी व्यास।
Air crashes, aircraft accidents, they're studied world over because there are lessons to be drawn. The cockpit voice recorder, the flight data recorder, it's in an orange-colored box that's known as the black box at the tail of the aircraft where it's relatively safe. We'll told the moment that's retrieved, that will be sent to Boeing for an analysis and then there would be better appreciation. Of course, the last conversation between the pilot and the air traffic controller was Mayday, Mayday. But why was this distress call given out? That clarity we are still awaiting. But in this gloom and doom, there was a miracle. One man of the 242 on board walked out of the aircraft on his feet. Watch that image. The police have now confirmed they found the lone survivor after this plane crash in Ahmedabad. The survivor has minor injuries, but as you can see, the man identified as Vishwas Kumar Ramesh. He was seated on seat number 11A. He was returning to the UK with his brother, who incidentally is still unaccounted for. India today has spoken to this miracle survivor. He recalled that horror. The man said there was a loud noise within 30 seconds of the takeoff. And after that, everything happened very, very quickly. He told India Today when he stood up, he was surrounded by bodies and debris all around. And then he just got up and started running away from that fire, from that fear. And Vishwas was later put in an ambulance. He was taken to hospital. He was in ICU. But listen in to what he had to say. I quickly want to cut across to India Today's Vijay Doshi joining me from the crash site, that medical college. Vijay, is there a little more clarity on survivors? Have there been other survivors? Are there people still unaccounted for? And what about the situation on ground? We believe a couple of buildings, they were burnt and they were damaged. Were there people inside these buildings?
यहाँ पे लोग खाना खा रहे थे, कुछ में कुछ ऐसे इंटर्न डॉक्टर्स थे, कुछ परिवार के साथ थे जिनके ऊपर ये कहर बन के टूटा। यहाँ पे जो हालत है, देखिए थालियों में खाना अभी भी पड़ा हुआ है, खाना खा रहे लोगों के ऊपर प्लेन गिरा, उसके बाद की क्या स्थिति हुई होगी कल्पना करना जो है वो बेहद ही मुश्किल है। यहाँ पे कांच जो है वो टूटे हुए हैं, शीशे टूटे हुए हैं, दीवार जो है यहाँ पे देखिए प्लेन का ये जो पार्ट है वो किस तरह मैस में आके गिरा और यहाँ की दीवार टूट गई है। पूरी तरह से ये मलबे में परिवर्तित हो गया है। प्लेन का मलबा था और इसने हॉस्टल के मैस को मलबे में परिवर्तित कर दिया है। किस तरह की स्थिति यहाँ पे है, जो मैस की स्थिति थी यहाँ पे ये डॉक्टर्स खाना खा रहे थे। ये ऐसे डॉक्टर हैं कि जो इंटर्न डॉक्टर्स हैं अभी यहाँ पढ़ाई कर रहे हैं और उसके बाद वो जो हैं आगे बढ़ने वाले हैं। उनसे पहले उनकी जो है, इनमें से कहा जा रहा है कि कुछ डॉक्टर्स की जान भी चली गई है। हालांकि आधिकारिक आंकड़ा नहीं दिया गया कि कितने डॉक्टर्स यहाँ पे थे और कितने जो हैं जिनकी मृत्यु हो चुकी है, पर 30 से ज़्यादा डॉक्टर्स ऐसे थे जिनको यहाँ से जो है तत्काल सारवार के लिए ले जाया गया, इलाज के लिए ले जाया गया, और उनके साथ उनके परिवार के भी कुछ लोग थे। ये स्थिति दिखाती है कि क्या हुआ होगा उस हादसे के वक्त, किस तरह की स्थिति रही होगी, लोग कैसे भागे होंगे, और जो जिनके हाथ में खाना था वो खाने के टेबल पे ही जो है उन्होंने अपनी आखिरी सांस ली होगी। भयावह दृश्य होंगे वो, और वहाँ पे हम अभी आज पहुँचे हैं। कितने लोग इनमें से जिंदा है, जब वो बाहर आएंगे तब वो इस बयां करेंगे कि क्या हादसा हुआ था। पर अभी किसी देख के ये अंदाज़ा लगाना कि उस वक्त क्या हुआ होगा ज़रा भी मुश्किल नहीं है। समझ सकते हैं कि आप खाना खा रहे हैं और ऊपर से कोई बम का गोला गिरे तो क्या हालत होगी, वैसी हालत यहाँ पे लोगों की हुई होगी। अहमदाबाद से कैमरामैन जिमिनी व्यास।
So Brijesh there reporting from ground zero at that medical college and hostel where some doctors and interns are feared injured, some very critical. Joining me now on this India Today special broadcast is Air Marshal V.K. Bhatia, former Director General Inspections and Flight Safety of the Indian Air Force. Angad Singh is an aerospace analyst who joins me on this broadcast. Group Captain Amitabh Ranjan is also an aviation and air safety expert and a commercial pilot who joins me on this special broadcast. Air Marshal Bhatia, to you first. You've been DG Flight Safety and Inspections in the Indian Air Force. When you look at the trajectory of this aircraft, when you look at the liftoff, the takeoff and crash within 38 seconds, are you in a position to form an opinion? What could have gone wrong? There was just a mayday call from the pilot?
Gaurav, first of all, I would like to convey my deepest condolences to the travelers and other people on the ground who have lost their lives, and to their families. And I must tell you that it's a very tragic and I think one of the most serious air accidents that India has witnessed for a long time. But looking at this, the way the aircraft has gone down, I'm sure that from the black box, which must have been recovered, that we will come to know actually as to what happened. But to me, it looks like that the aircraft has, after liftoff, immediately after liftoff, has lost power on both the engines. And that could have happened in all probability because of bird ingestion of big size bird injection, which would have caused for the engines to wind down. And they did gain some height with the power that was available till the engines ceased. They were able to climb to few hundred feet, but that was not enough for them to take any correct action except to go straight ahead and just do the best they could do. And it's quite evident from the mayday call which the captain has given. I am not sure. The black box will tell us whether he lost both the engines or he lost single engine. But to me, it appears that he could have lost both engines because the aircraft went straight ahead and kept losing height thereafter till it crashed against the building on the ground. And
And
this
then
is
there
the
was nothing,
reason.
Angad, there's nothing that can save the aircraft or the passengers at that time except a miracle, which in this case saved one life because it's full of fuel ahead of a long-haul flight. But if both engines, lose thrust and propulsion, is propulsion the issue prima facie?
That's right, Gaurav. That's what it looks like. The air marshal summed it up already. But it looks like a dual engine loss because normally if you lose one engine, the aircraft will roll or yaw in the direction of the failed engine. This aircraft carried on straight ahead, suggesting it had lost both. And that's the worst time at which to lose both engines at takeoff. There's really nothing the pilots could have done at that point to recover that. There have been almost no instances of safe outcomes when things like this happen in the past.
Yeah, because not everybody is lucky like that pilot who lost both engines and was able to land on the Hudson. There was nothing. Flight Lieutenant Meenu Vadia also joins me on this show, founder, president of Federation of Indian Pilots and a former Air India pilot. Flight Lieutenant Vadia, there's nothing that the pilots can do in such a situation. Your assessment and the chatter on pilots groups, there's a lot of chatter looking at these images. Your conclusion, sir?
Okay, I've been watching the videos on various channels, and I have something critical to explain. First of all, when any aircraft gets airborne, the pilot raises the undercarriage straight away. Now, in
Yes.
this case, the, the the undercarriage is up when it reaches even about 500 feet or so. That is a little unusual. So how could it be explained? Almost immediately as the pilot took off, there must have been some sort of major emergency. Also, the survivor, it seems, has given a statement that he heard a loud noise immediately
Bang.
on takeoff.
Yes.
So there is a possibility. Yes, the power must have been available to the pilots. And if you see the time factor, I've been watching and timing the pictures that have been shown. It takes just about 12 seconds for the aircraft after rotation to reach the altitude that is about 600 feet. Yes, he must have had some power available at that stage for him to be able to climb to 600 feet. But the emergency may have started even before that. And by the time he reached 600 feet, and after that, he has come down in about 15 seconds or so. So the whole time factor has been less than 30 seconds from the time of rotation. And obviously, the emergency, when it has happened, the pilot is at least in that short period that he has, he's focusing on how to handle that emergency. And very briefly, he's just transmitted, and that also he had so much time to transmit just Mayday. He couldn't have that time because the most important thing for him to do is to maintain direction and to maintain and to sort out the emergency that he is facing. So, in spite of the problems that he has had on board, he's kept the aircraft straight. And if you see the way it has come down to land, it seems as if there was a runway ahead of him is coming to do a normal landing. So it's not a major, if the aircraft had reached about 600 feet and dropped from the sky, there could have been no survivors at all. So in this case, the pilot has tried to make this aircraft as safe as possible, but unfortunately there were buildings there, the hotels. So he's gone and crashed into a
Building,
crowded
a
area,
medical
and that's
college,
where,
yes.
and that's why it has got a bowl of flame and fire. But maybe if there were no buildings, maybe more survivors could have been expected from this crash. And I wouldn't have called it a crash only. What I would call it a pilot assisted crash, because he's tried to try and put the aircraft down as smoothly as possible.
He's tried to put the aircraft down, but in that situation, I know we're only speculating, Group Captain Amitabh Ranjan, if the problem arose just as he lifted off, could it have been possible to abort the takeoff at that stage?
Sir, I would first of all I would convey my heartfelt condolences to all the families of the people who have suffered in this tragedy. Coming to your question, the aircraft could not have aborted takeoff after it obtained its V1. That it's rotated and it's airborne. Now there is no way that it can abort its takeoff. The best action the pilot did is evident in all the videos which have come out. Like my panelist before me has covered very nicely, that it is not a crash. It is a pilot assisted touchdown. Unfortunately, the area where it had to touch down was populated. There were obstructions, and that's why the aircraft could not be recovered safely. Had it been an open area, we wouldn't have seen a tragedy to this scale. So the takeoff could not have been aborted once the aircraft was airborne.
Okay. Air Marshal Bhatia said it was a pilot-assisted attempt at a pilot-assisted touchdown. But when you've run out of runway, you've crossed the perimeter wall of the airport and you're out in the city, and cities keep expanding and eating into that open area closer to airports. I don't know if it was even possible to continue and try and make a loop. That clearly wasn't possible in this scenario, Air Marshal Bhatia, because the lone survivor, the sole survivor, says the moment there was a liftoff, there was a loud bang. What would explain a loud bang? A bird hit?
Well, you know, I mean, you're absolutely right. What has happened is that immediately after the aircraft got airborne, it has actually experienced that emergency. And soon after that, he gave a mayday call as well. I am only assuming, but of course, the black box will actually tell us what exactly happened. But there is a possibility that if there were a large flock of birds, and I'm talking about big birds, which might have got ingested in both the engines and caused a double engine failure. And with the residual power that he had, he was able to climb up to some height. And in that melee and in that emergency, they could have forgotten even to raise the undercarriage. But the fact is that this actually caused for the engine loss. I remember in my younger days, I had a similar case in a fighter aircraft where I had a bird head immediately after takeoff. And my engine, I was in a single engine fighter where it had actually started to wind down. And the only thing I could do in a split second thinking was to do a teardrop turn and bring the aircraft back on the opposite runway to be able to land safely. That was just lucky, I can say. But there was no possibility at all of
In
my
a
coming
commercial
back
aircraft.
doing a normal
Yes.
thing. But in this particular case, I feel, and I'm saying it is only my assumption, that there's a possibility that he lost power on both engines. And you can see that he gained height initially, but thereafter he had to resort to gliding the aircraft down and trying to put it down at a safe place. Obviously, he could not find any safe place where he could touch down on the ground safely. If there was a clear ground, there was a possibility, as my colleague is saying, that he would have been able to touch down and maybe able to save many more lives.
Yeah, but 57 meters length, 60 meters the wingspan in a crowded city like Ahmedabad, clearly that wasn't possible. Angad, you remember that report in the New York Times, perhaps, a whistleblower who said that when Boeing was putting the Dreamliner together, there were some shortcuts that were used, there were some issues with it. The FAA that time had claimed there would be an investigation. Is it too soon to draw a parallel there?
It's definitely too soon to be linking this crash with any production issues at Boeing. This plane has been in service for years. So if this was a production issue, if this was something fresh off the production line, it would have manifested itself much earlier. And in the same vein, if I may, I think it behooves us all to be a little circumspect with analysis of very grainy, low quality video, number one, and layperson testimony, even if it is of the sole survivor. Aircraft takeoffs, if you've been in anything from a narrow body Airbus to a wide body Boeing, they are bumpy, noisy affairs. So what might sound like an unusual bang to the layperson might just be, just the rattles and bumps of any takeoff. I think at this point, the information, the most useful information will come from the cockpit voice recorder and from the flight data recorder, the black box.
How long does it take to retrieve and analyze that information is the point we'll come to on in just a moment. But I want our viewers to take a look at reports that are coming in from ground zero. So as the analysts and pilots here have argued that this was an attempt at a pilot-assisted touchdown when there was an issue with the aircraft, and within 30 to 40 seconds of takeoff. But then there were these huge buildings. There were these, the hostel of a medical college, the dining hall of a medical college, and the aircraft went and crashed into that. Parts of the Boeing Dreamliner are still lodged in the hostel building. There have been casualties even on ground, and my colleagues on Ground Zero bring you this report.
Air India Flight 171 from Ahmedabad to London crashed into a medical college hostel in Meghani Nagar, just a few meters from the international airport. The Boeing 787 Dreamliner burst into flames as it first hit the junior wing of the hostel and then crashed into the senior student wing. It was lunchtime and most students were taking a break when all hell broke loose. The crash charred the entire building complex.
बताया जा रहा है कि जहां सबसे पहला कांटेक्ट प्लेन क्रैश होने के बाद प्लेन का हुआ है वो यही मैस वाली बिल्डिंग है। इसके जो कांच है वो भी टूटे हुए दिखाई पड़ रहे हैं और ऊपर का जो पूरा हिस्सा है वो पूरा टूट चुका है और इसी में लगभग 5 जितने जो स्टूडेंट हैं उनकी डेथ इसी में हुई है। ये जो जानकारी है वो अब तक हासिल हो रही है और खास करके जो भी अभी तक सत्तावार तौर पर डेथ का कोई आंकड़ा जाहिर नहीं किया गया है। एयर इंडिया का जो प्लेन था वो जब क्रैश हुआ तो उसके जो अलग अलग हिस्से हैं अभी भी यहाँ पे अलग बिखरे हुए दिखाई पड़ रहे हैं।
The aftermath is shattering. The plane's tail fin hit the hostel roof. Landing gear and tires lodged into one of the rooms. And other plane parts still stuck in the building.
मैं यहीं मेरे ऑफिस में बैठी थी, जैसा धड़ाका हुआ मैं वहाँ ऑफिस से वहाँ गई। जो डॉक्टर्स के फ्लैट थे उनको बहुत डैमेज हुए हैं और उसमें से कितने डॉक्टरों को हमने निकाला है।
आने के बाद देखा कि पूरा मलबा बिखरा हुआ, आग लगी है, पूरा धुआं गुबारा है, कुछ भी दिखाई नहीं दे रहा, समझ में नहीं आ पा रहा था क्या है।
The hostel building now looks like a post-apocalyptic scene. Burnt and damaged parts of the Air India flight lie around as a horrific reminder of one of the worst air tragedies in India. With Atul Tiwari, Bureau Report, India Today.
Air Marshal Bhatia, there are reports that say that aircrafts undergo A, B, C and D level maintenance checks. In your appreciation, and since you've been DG Flight Safety and Inspections, how effective are these maintenance schedules in identifying issues like those, incidentally, that have also been alleged by whistleblowers regarding so-called structural flaws in the Boeing 787 Dreamliner?
You know, what you are referring to are the issues that the 787 suffered from in the initial stages of its development. These issues have been sorted out, and like they had this problem with the battery also. But I do not believe, the aircraft has been flying for more than a decade now, and it must have flown millions of hours. So all those issues were taken care of, and that is how this aircraft has been declared fit for operations. So I don't believe that there is any issue there. The problem is that something can happen, like what happened today, immediately after takeoff, when very little which a pilot can do except to take the aircraft to any safe place that he can find where he can bring the aircraft down. In this case, if he has lost both the engines.
And in this case, there was no safe place to bring that aircraft down safely. Group Captain Ranjan, Captain Sabarwal, the commander of the aircraft, the pilot had 8,200 hours of flying experience. You heard, there was one mayday call. In your appreciation, in such a situation, could anything else have been done, or this was a fait accompli?
A pilot with those many hours, and we have to understand it very well that the pilot till the last moment was composed. That's why he could give a mayday call. In case of a panic situation, if the pilot was not in control of the situation, if he was not over the things as they were happening, he wouldn't have given a mayday call. If he has given a mayday call, it means there is an emergency on board. The pilot is trying to convey, and thereafter the pilot gets busy. And as far as we have been talking that as to how the aircraft was still flying, if there was loss of thrust, there is a residual thrust. And please remember, a Dreamliner with the tons it carries, the weight, the momentum by itself will keep it in a shallow climb, and thereafter it starts a descent towards Mother Earth. So there was not much in the control of the pilot in case it was a loss of thrust. And that loss of thrust has been reported in the Mayday call. So it could have been a bird hit, it could have been both engine failures. Both engine failures is a very, very, very unlikely scenario which can happen in this class of an aircraft, which have different fuel lines, different fuel tanks, different fuel pumps feeding both the engines. So loss
Because,
of thrust
that's the
or
point.
mechanical or technical reason is,
Yes, that's the point I was coming
yeah,
to, Flight
a loss
Lieutenant
of thrust
Varia. There
because
would be
of,
multiple
yeah.
levels of redundancies in an aircraft. So, what explains loss of thrust and loss of thrust in two engines? We are told that an aircraft can take off even on a single engine, can make a loop and come down and land. Did every level of redundancy fail?
Yes. On one engine, the aircraft can fly absolutely safely and even divert to another airfield for emergency. But let me clarify a few points that have been covered earlier. I have had a case on a jumbo with 4 engines, and it doesn't have to be a large bird. A flock of pigeons, only pigeons, flew past on a takeoff run on a jumbo, and we rejected the takeoff because it was very close to the getting airborne speed, that is V1 speed, and we rejected the takeoff. And afterwards, we found on ground that 3 engines had been totally written off. On a jumbo, 3 engines have been written
My
off
God.
just by a flock of pigeons that flew past us. Secondly, with power failure, can be multiple reasons for it. There could be a technical reason also, and don't rule out totally a matter of sabotage also. It's not impossible, but not likely. So let us not jump to any conclusion as to what happened. But what we are asking about flight data recorder and voice recorder. See, normally a voice recorder can be retrieved and heard almost immediately, which is not a problem. But the flight data recorder has to be analyzed. It takes weeks for it. It comes in digital format, etc. And first of all, after getting the data from the DFDR, to interpret it and it takes a very long time. But
Sir,
when that is obtained,
the aspect that you raised about suspected, it could have been, and you're saying it's, I'm sure it's in the realm of speculation, suspected sabotage. What kind of sabotage in your appreciation?
no, let's not speculate anything. I'm saying any possibility can be there, birds, etc., fuel starvation, technical problems, or sabotage, whatever. So let's not speculate right now. We will get to know the correct reasons. You know what happens after a DFDR is available? They put this on a simulator and let the simulators do what the aircraft would have done on takeoff at this thing. And then you will see exactly what has happened in the simulator, but will take a long time. Let the specialists go and inquire into all these details. And I'm sure you'll have teams from Boeing also, from the engine manufacturers and FAA all coming, and you will get some solution and you will get some answers in the soon in the near future. But what is good to appreciate, the very fact that the aircraft was kept straight. And as mentioned earlier, it is possible that the pilot may not have forgotten to raise the undercarriage. He may have purposely kept it down, because if you're doing a crash landing, it is advisable to keep your gear down. So it is possible that he couldn't have forgotten about it. So let's not speculate anything. Let's get more details and go along. I'm sure everyone wants to know what happened overnight, but we'll have to hold our horses till the more details come out.
analyzing the data because Air Marshal Bhatia, Boeing 787-8 is described as amongst the safest aircraft. It's flying world over. It has advanced safety features. Now, the automated systems that assist the pilot in handling a critical situation, even if it was engine failure, does the pilot override them? Do these systems then take over and try and prevent an air crash like the one that happened in Ahmedabad today?
No, actually, if you have total power failure on both the engines, there is very little that a pilot can do except to make the best use of what is the terrain ahead. And here I remember Captain Sully, who actually a similar case where both his engines were lost due to bird heads, and he happened to see a river Hudson and decided split second to make a water landing on that. And in that process, he was able to save the lives of everybody on board. Now, unfortunately, our pilot today perhaps did not have maybe
The
Sabarmati in
Hudson or
sight.
any river,
And Sabarmati, I'm told that has got water now. I remember when I was there as CNC, Southwestern Air Command, there was no water in Sabarmati. But today, Sabarmati has water. And if he was close enough to Sabarmati, there was a possibility that he would have actually went for it to make landing on the water in Sabarmati. But that was not the case. He only had that ground in front. And that too, it was covered with many buildings. And the best he could do was whatever he did. And in this process, there was no place for him to be able to put down the aircraft safely. That is what happened. And it's very, very unfortunate. Very unfortunate.
It indeed is, because the first ever crash involving a Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner, it's like we were discussing, renowned for its advanced technology, robust safety systems. This Dreamliner's unexpected crash and failure raises multiple questions. Investigators will now rely on the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder to perhaps ascertain what happened. Why did this plane crash within seconds of liftoff?
The air crash in Ahmedabad on Thursday is the first ever crash of a Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner. The Air India plane en route to London from Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel International Airport crashed just minutes after takeoff. The crash marks the first catastrophic loss of a 787-8 Dreamliner since the model's debut in 2011. Equipped with the latest avionics, fly-by-wire controls and multiple layers of automated safety protocols, Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner is globally recognized for its reliability and advanced engineering. The first model in Boeing's Dreamliner series. This is a state-of-the-art long-haul wide-body aircraft designed for efficiency, passenger comfort and reduced environmental impact. Widely used for intercontinental travel, this aircraft features integrated modular avionics, a centralized system that reduces component count, streamlines maintenance and boosts performance. With a seating capacity of 242 to 290 passengers, the aircraft can fly up to a range of 13,530 kilometers non-stop. Made with advanced composites, the aircraft is lighter and more fuel-efficient, making it perfect for long-haul journeys. The cause of the crash remains unknown. The incident had immediate financial repercussions. Boeing shares dropped 8% in the US, pre-market trading following the crash. The critical question now is, what went wrong? The investigators will find vital clues in the flight data recorder or the black box, which is placed at the rear end of the Dreamliner. The black box is designed to survive crashes. Bureau Report, India Today.
Marshal Bhatia, there are questions that are already being asked about Boeing's track record. As you saw in that report, their shares are plunging. But what's your take? Of course, the issues that were raised about the Boeing, the 737 MAX, that had several issues. Cases were settled out of court. There was an instance of a plane door opening mid-air. Has safety been given a short trip in Boeing?
Well, there was a report, as far as 737 MAX is concerned, that because of perhaps the requirement of increasing the output, there is a possibility of what you're suggesting. But I will not say that Boeing would have that kind of a culture. And as far as uh, the Dreamliner is concerned, the 787, we all know and we have seen in the past that is one of the safest aircraft ever produced. And it's really state of the art. The possibility of this kind of a accident happening because of some slipshod methods having been adopted by the manufacturers, I will not subscribe to them without any proof. I will not talk about that as such because I don't think that may be true. But what I'm trying to say is that this kind of an emergency can actually happen. And we have to actually, shall I say, we have to construct our airfields in such a manner that we have that kind of a funnel in front of the runways so that we are able to put down the aircraft should there an emergency happen like this. But the pressure of urbanization is so much that all this is forgotten and we are allowed to actually develop the cities in a method that we are doing, which we should not be doing. So we have to keep in mind as to those funnels where we should be able to put on the aircraft if they suffer from this kind of a mishap immediately after takeoff.
But how long should that funnel be before I bring in Group Captain Ranjan, just to address this point? So the plane takes off 625 feet, there's loss of power or there is some issue or that, if it clearly isn't loss of power, if it's a pilot-assisted landing effort because the plane's not yawing, it's not pitching, it's just gliding down. So if it's a pilot-assisted landing effort, how much should that funnel be? How long? Marshal Bhatia.
Are you talking to me? What I'm saying
Yeah.
is that we should be looking at something like, say, 1 to 2 kilometers ahead of the. I am only talking about a small funnel, which we should think in terms of having this. I'm saying this that it's a wishful thinking because
Sure.
urbanization pressures are such that it may not actually happen. But this kind of a thing where you lose both engines or all your power as such are very, very rare, very, very rare. And one
Okay.
has to take a calculated risk. So it is left for us to decide whether we want to create that funnel or we want to leave it because this is one in a million case.
It's one in a million. Sadly, it's happened today in India, in Gujarat. And sadly, there are reports of many, many losses of lives. Group Captain Ranjan, you've studied the flight safety record of aviation in India. Air India, of course, has had some crashes in 2010 and one in 2020. Is there something specific in pilot training, operational movements that need to be relooked, something in standard operating procedures, especially if you're looking at a long-haul international flight with so much fuel, so many passengers, this kind of temperature when the takeoff is happening, and then there's a loss of thrust or power?
To start with, see, whether an aircraft has got one passenger or it has got 400 passengers, the pilot training has to be of the same standards because one life, 400 lives, 500 lives, all lives are equally important. Whether it be a VVIP flight or flying just just any ordinary citizen of this country or any other country, the flight safety procedures have to be absolutely perfect. It is something which is very common in the pilots community. That is, takeoff is optional and landing is mandatory. That going to say that a takeoff can be abandoned for lack
Aborted,
of anything. It can be aborted. But once in the air, landing is mandatory. You don't arrive, you land. So the procedure-wise things are in place. The pilot training wise, everything is in place. It is just that 1 in a million, like Air Marshal Bhatia put it very aptly. It's 1 in a million case, and for that we cannot start making runways. But yes, in case of a new runway, we can always plan ecological
that there
park
should be a funnel.
before, and yes, it can be easily planned that there should be ecological park where it's just a green belt. It's a park. It can be used by the public at any given time. But then there are no buildings coming up there. So that would be a very, very useful thing in case of something of this
Though there
nature
are
ever
reports in
happens.
cases of ecological parks, it brings in more birds, more bird activity, and then more losses, more, threat to the aircraft.
More birds.
That
Yes.
And because we've grappled with this when there were as both you and Air Marshal Bhatia would remember, when Indian Air Force fighter jets, a lot of them were seeing these bird hit issues due to ecological parks or forests close to airfields, and especially when military airfields are out of the city. I also want to show our viewers the last video that's emerged of former Gujarat Chief Minister Vijay Rupani just as he boarded that aircraft. And there you see, so there are these passengers who were taking videos and they were sending those videos to their families. Vijay Rupani, the former Chief Minister of Gujarat, very senior BJP leader, he was seen entering the Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel International Airport before the crash. In fact, there's also a video of him entering the aircraft, and I also want to bring in my colleague Brijesh Doshi for more on this. I believe there are several passengers who shared some of these videos online on their social media platforms about just before the takeoff, saying bye to families, and these are really some things that may help investigators piece together what happened. Brijesh.
Definitely, Gaurav, see the devastating and the horrific plane crash accident happened in Ahmedabad after long 35 years. The former Chief Minister of Gujarat, Vijay Rupani, was there. He was going to meet her daughter in London. He was alone in the flight without his family, without his wife. He was the alone passenger from the family who was going to London. But after the plane took off, in a few moments, plane was burnt into the ashes and crashed on the BJ Medical Hostel. So this was the horrific incident where Gujarat has lost his Gujarat's ex-chief minister, who was the chief minister during the regime of 2016 to 2021. The first CM who has served more than 5 years other than Narendra Modi in Gujarat in the last 30 years. So,
Brijesh, keep tracking that story, and especially as more information filters out about students at that medical college, we'll track that story closely. But I want to leave you with the story of that miracle. 242 on board, 230 passengers, 10 aircrew, 2 pilots in all, but that one man who walked out of the plane with very, very minor injuries. He was on board this aircraft, and even he doesn't know how he managed to survive. His sibling, sadly, he has no information about his brother who was also on board that aircraft. He was returning to the United Kingdom with his brother. He says, my brother is still missing. I leave you with that image of one survivor. But there are many lessons that will be drawn from this air crash. The flight data recorder, the cockpit voice recorder, they will be analyzed over next several days, weeks and months, and we'll be tracking that story very, very closely. That is all I have for you on India First this evening. Many thanks for watching.